episode number 8 of Halo was entitled Allegiance, and the description on Paramount Plus I think was very, very truthful to the fact that all characters must choose sides. And I think by the end of episode 8, we all have a very clear understanding of characters' true motives and intentions. I think one would argue maybe this should have been more a focal point of the show. I could definitely see, and I talked with my wife at the end because I'm a super fan. I'm freaking out. My eyes did water up during the big fight scene. We'll get to that in a moment. I had goosebumps all over my arms. I was so amped up for it. And then my wife is the voice of reason, you know. And she's like, Jim, it was a good episode, but like, why didn't the series start here? I'm like, yeah, that's a good question. Why didn't the series start here? I think exploring that relationship, particularly with John and Mckee, could have really been spread out significantly farther than it was. No Quan, thankfully. No Soren, unthankfully. I love Soren so much. Lots and lots of time with John and Mckee. And in just a very short episode, John has his first kiss, his first hookup, his first creepy Cortana watching everything. Mckee kind of turning on her beliefs, then Mckee turning back on the humanity, back to her original beliefs. I can totally understand my wife's sentiment of like, hey, that maybe could have been spread out. It maybe made it more impactful. I was so invested in it. I don't think in my head I was processing the moment to moment of how rapid it was. I was just kind of floored by it. And I think this is going to be a very divisive episode. I mean, which one isn't, honestly? But I think this episode specifically is going to be incredibly divisive because people are going to say, well, Spartans aren't supposed to kiss and, you know, have sex, and like, this is weird. They took John in a different direction. But I thought they did a phenomenal job of framing the fact that he wasn't alone. And there was a really good quote in there earlier on in the episode when John is trying to convince Admiral and the captain that we need to use Mckee. She is a key to this whole thing. And basically he says something like, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was, the gist of it was Captain Keyes basically says, she was stripped away from everything and you expect her to just suddenly like find herself now. And John says, yeah, I did. And I was like, oh, you kind of almost forget that we weaponized this man and turned him into this perfect soldier. That's how different everybody thinks about John and how John views himself in the organization and in the world. So I totally bought into his relationship with Mckee. It made perfect sense. It was framed so well, of outsiders who felt that they had been used, who kind of are coming into their own and finding who they believe they need to be. So them getting together made sense to me. And when we saw them, no butts this episode, which I was, honestly, if there was going to be a butt episode, I figured it would have been this one, but no butts. But when they were both, getting ready for the deed, and you see all the scars that John has, and then you see the scar that Mckee had on her back from constantly being beaten and zapped as a child, and maybe even by the Covenant, we're not sure. It all comes back and you're like, wow, these two really damaged people found each other. And I look at John in a totally different light after this episode. They really, really emphasized his humanity, and I loved it for that. And I know I mention this in just about every single episode of this review that I do. Takes me back to those moments in the closing scenes of Halo 4. So Mckee has an opportunity here to kill John, the demon, the one who is single-handedly winning the war for humanity. And she's kind of stroking his ear, and she's got that energy sword finger, and she rips it out and throws it away. Big suspension of disbelief. Like, you're going to tell me the security room isn't 24/7 monitor. Okay, I got it. But still, the act of her basically giving up on her mission and saying, you know what? I want to fight for John. Not so much for humanity. I believe in John. And if John says that this is the right thing to do, I'm going to forget my Covenant brainwashing and I'm going to go with John. And I thought that was such a cool, cool thing. But like I said, it was a lot to unpack very quickly. We had a lot of stuff with Halsey talking a lot about her envisioning of this, humanity master race, essentially. And, humanity being their own worst enemy, kind of being too smart for her own good. It was funny that her demise comes from Cortana, the robotic part of her that actually acts more human than herself, which is nice little play to see that the John Cortana connection is actually starting to occur. And everybody chooses sides, and Cortana chooses the side of John. And I wonder why. Obviously, Cortana has been programmed and promised John's body, essentially, when Halsey is done with her. Cortana is obviously absorbing all of humanity, watching pretty much all of the Reach installation 24/7, absorbing information, interactions. She's seeing John's vital signs peak up and down, and particularly up when he's with Mckee. He understands that there's a physical connection there, or she understands there's a physical connection there, and understanding that, like, kind of the true love, almost the innocent kind of love that two grizzled people have because they've never had it before. Very pure in that sense. But I wonder if, and we didn't see it, but in my head, she must have finally figured out, Cortana must have finally figured out or saw that Miranda Keyes had figured out that that weird wave file was actually McKee's voice, and understanding that Mckee was part of this plot. That's what I think. Maybe it'll come to light, maybe not. Why Cortana didn't just flip the switch back and turn the comms back on, well, it makes good TV. But what it ultimately devolves into was an insane fight. And I always talk about the idea of a rogue Spartan and how cool that is. And we have it with the Z protocol, which is this backdoor channel that Halsey has embedded into all of her Spartans, a way to speak directly to them that trumps any other order that they have. And when you see Vanek and Riz armor up and basically cold cock and take out Kai, the way that they're walking with such authority, the way the Riz is storming down the halls, and his voice is so robotically modulated, kind of reminds me a little bit of Tyrael from Diablo. But the way he's so aggressive, and the way that they zoom in on their face, and you have all the, like, the HUD, the camera and everything of their helmet, he looks mad. He looks really mad. And he's like, John's not well. And that's all he needs to know. He hasn't divorced himself from Halsey the way that John and Kai have. And it culminates in an insane fist fight where two Spartans in full Mjolnir power armor are going up against John, who's basically in his, underwear, essentially. Despite the fact that Halsey talks about how John isn't the best or the brightest or he just had that thing. And they talk a lot about that in the game too. And I'm trying to keep the two universes separate. But wow, the way that those two interacted, the way that those two things in my head are playing against each other, man, John sure put up a hell of a fight. It just shows how tough, and I'm really proud of this as a Halo fan because I know this, and I'm glad to share it with all of you. It was really cool that people got to see just how tough Spartans are in or out of power armor. John takes some serious, looks like his hand is, maybe all his fingers are broken, I'm not sure. He takes some serious damage very rapidly from Vanek. Vanek basically uppercuts him through a steel beam, and John gets back up. I think that just shows the insane amount of hardening and the exoskeleton enhancements that Spartans undergo. And it's so cool to see that. It takes this hero fantasy in my head of what a Spartan is, and it just blows it up to a billion. So major fanboy points there for me, at least, on this. Very powerful scene, very awesome. The fight was choreographed amazingly. Cortana starts to help out John, giving him intel of where to block and where to punch, because he's basically like a caged Wolverine at this point. He's fighting for his life. The really cool part where Cortana turns on the Warthog and pins Vanek to the post. But of course, as we saw earlier with Kai, nothing's going to stop a Spartan. And Vanek pushing back on that Warthog was just, gives me goosebumps and nerd chills. And what an amazing, amazing scene of him pushing. And he's like, he's pushing it back and gets back in the fight. Ultimately culminates in Kai basically, Stone Cold Steve Austin style, coming in off screen, flying knee, takes out Riz. There's Then it comes down to the old Mexican standoff. Everybody's got guns pointed at each other. John's the only one in danger, by the way. I know that they talk about the shield. Two more shots and the shields will be gone. His shields would have recharged. Again, that's a TVism. I overlooked that. John's the only one that would have suffered a mortal wound at that point. And would Riz have pulled the trigger? Well, we never get to find out because Mckee, after Paragoski and Miranda Keyes kind of find out that Mckee, her true intention originally was to be a villain. Maybe she has changed slightly in this episode. You know, kind of provokes her a little bit. You know, a little bit of electrocution on the back kind of pisses the Mckee off. And ultimately, Mckee reverts back, touches the artifact, seemingly probably what's going to lead to the fall of Reach in this universe, that now the Covenant will know where this is. It seems to be some sort of homing beacon or something. Everybody gets blown away, and we'll never find out as to whether or not Riz would have pulled the trigger. I think she would have. I really think she would have, and I hope they explore that concept in the future. If Vanek and Riz decide to get their chips taken out, or if the Spartan program devolves in this universe based on this incident. But man, what a battle of the Titans. It leaves with, the episode ends ambiguously in the sense that John now missing his chip, now Mckee saying goodbye to him, hallucinating back on the Halo Ring world. I assume to be Installation 04. I guess we'll find out at some point. Clearly, Mckee has served her purpose now in that sense that she has been the beacon and now has explained so much to her people. And I suspect the Covenant and the UNSC are going to have a bloodbath. The Reach is going to get destroyed, and they'll find Halo at the end of the season, which is, I think, what everybody thought was going to happen. But now, looking at the damage that was done, can the Spartans, who are humanity's best hope, rally together? What's gonna become of Halsey? The guilty consciences on so many characters' heads. Jacob Keyes and Admiral Paragonski. Even Halsey to some extent, Cortana definitely. A lot of guilty consciences. Are they going to come to terms? And or is this going to be a theme in the show that people are constantly conflicted? All is fair in love and war. And this show, I think, has really changed the way that I look at Halo. I love Halo, the traditional Halo in that sense. But this show has absolutely opened my eyes to this insane, cool silver universe. I've loved the ride. I know next week is it, unfortunately, for a while. But I hope people who don't know about Halo want to love Halo because of the show and appreciate what the show has done. And inversely, people like myself who eat, breathe, live, sleep, die Halo can find a new sense of satisfaction and enjoyment in a kind of an alternate take, and maybe amplifying and conflicting some of the feelings we had already. But very interesting to see somebody who, in my eyes, is a hero larger than life, and John, to see him very human in this episode and very vulnerable. And I related to that quite a bit. So 10 out of 10 for me on this one. What an absolute home run, smash hit. I absolutely adore this show. And that's my review and thoughts on it. So leave some comments below. I will be back again next week for the last time to talk all about Halo, the television show. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.